welcome back to the Austin Bay Media Podcast. I'm your host, Austin Belzer. Today we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of one of the best superhero movies ever, Spider-Man 2.
Uh,
Always good to
I'm gonna,
talk about one of my favorite movies.
yeah, I'm gonna just disagree with you in that it is not one of the best superhero movies. It's the best superhero movie.
Well, it's funny because I debated that when I was writing it. I was like, do I put one of the best or the best?
I mean, it's all subjective. I'm sure it's not everyone's favorite, but it's my favorite.
Yeah,
And I think it stands above basically anything that has come since.
yeah, for sure. But for those who don't know about Awesome Friday, tell them about what you do over there.
Awesome Friday is a weekly-ish podcast in which me and my co-host Simon review two new movies every week. So movies or TV. So, for example, our most recent episode, as of the time we're talking, we talked about the Fallout TV show and a new Canadian film that should be out. I don't know when this is going out, but it's probably out by the time you hear this, called Humane. But yeah, that's basically it. We have some 10 to 15 minutes of banter and then 45 minutes or so of talking about two new movies.
Awesome.
And it's pretty fun. We try to mix it up too. We try to cover the big stuff. We try to, because we are Canadian and because I'm the one organizing it, we try to cover Canadian stuff whenever possible as well, which I feel is important.
Yeah. Uh, and for those who haven't, check out his Patreon as well. Very good. Um,
Oh, thanks. Yeah, if you join our Patreon, and I hope that you do. It's very cheap, but
yeah,
we do a bonus episode where we just talk for like 30 minutes at a time. It's pretty free form, but it's pretty fun.
yeah, and bonus if you're Trekkie, all the membership tiers are Star Trek themed.
Yeah, they're all Star Trek ranks because I am indeed a huge Trekkie.
Yeah, but other than that, any recommendations? Like a movie, TV show, album, anything?
Um, so it's kind of cheating because I'm going to be on a different podcast, next month, talk about the year this movie came out. But there's a great Canadian film you should definitely watch called The Red Violin, which came out in
Ooh, okay.
1990, which is a very artful, very lovely and soulful film that chronicles the life of a violin from the time that it was made until what was at the time like the present. Full of great Canadian talent. It's a international co-production, so like part of it takes place in England, and that part is shot in England and stars Jason Fleming, and then there's another part in Germany and another part in China, and the part in the present takes place in Montreal, with a lead performance by Samuel L. Jackson in a much more understated and sort of low-key role than you would normally expect from him. It's a really great little Canadian film.
I'll have to check that out. I'll have to see where that's streaming if it is anywhere.
It
I know
is
when,
it is here in Canada. I'm not sure if it is in the States.
yeah, that's the main reason. I'm like, well, it could be streaming on Crave in Canada, but stream like on Tubi in America.
I'm sure it's somewhere, yeah.
Like I got
Um,
this notification earlier today that Lady in the Water is streaming on Tubi now.
Turns out that Tubi is actually pretty great. Yeah, I mean, I only recently sort of bought in, but like once they had an update recently that made their UI a little bit better, and um, their offerings are a little bit expanded, and I think it's a pretty great service. And the ads are not, it's ad supported, so it's free. They're not that obnoxious. I
Yeah, I
mean,
think
they're
I
ads, so they're obnoxious, but they're not that obnoxious.
yeah, they're not Hulu obnoxious.
Yeah, I can't speak to that because we don't have that here, but they're
It's
not like the CTV app obnoxious either. So
just just like imagine like if you were in the middle of Spider-Man 2, and then it just decided to serve you a pizza ad when Peter Parker gets fired from his pizza job in this movie. Like that, and then another commercial, and then another commercial about like Ford or Chevy trucks.
yep, that sounds like the CTV app up here. I looked it up. The Red Violin is streaming on Tubi and Pluto TV and Freevee in the States. So there you go.
But with that said, let's get into Spider-Man 2. First and foremost, I guess, what was your earliest memory of Spider-Man 2?
My earliest memory of Spider-Man 2 is seeing it in the theater opening weekend, I believe. It was 2004, so I was about 23. Actually, I think I remember it came out in June 2004, just in time for my birthday. So yeah, I was just 23 when it came out, and just seeing it on the big screen, I was hugely excited for it. I was a huge fan of the first Spider-Man film a couple years before, and I just couldn't wait to see more Spider-Man at that point. I've always thought that Tobey Maguire was a great Spider-Man. I was very excited for Doc Ock, who's one of my favorite Spider-Man villains, and Sam Raimi even then was basically my favorite director, so it's kind of a match made in heaven for me.
Yeah, it's probably a similar memory for me. I saw it in theaters too, although I'm gonna reveal my age here a little bit. I was 10, uh, and saw it with my mom. In fact, me and my mom have this tradition ever since the first Spider-Man movie came out, because I'm such a big Spider-Man dork. I can't remember which theater I saw it in. I don't know if it's the drive-in or whatever, but we always had this like pact that every time a new Spider-Man movie comes out, we see it together. So I think we might have went to the drive-in to see this. There was like a drive-in near our local highway that we saw it at. So, um, that's probably my earliest memory. Spider-Man 2 is just so great, and then obviously the DVD and stuff like that. But that comes much way later. But yeah, I guess that's my earliest memory. I probably have kind of similar memories. It's not that long ago,
I mean, I
but with that,
remember distinctly one of the biggest things about it was this was 2004, right? So
mhm.
I remember going to the cinema to buy a ticket and then standing in line for like an hour and change to watch it as well, which is a thing that you just don't have to do anymore,
Yeah,
which I'm, to be fair, very glad about, but it is a different experience just standing in a line with a bunch of other people who are super hyped to see a movie. Standing in line is never fun. But if you're going to stand in a line for something nerdy with a bunch of other nerds who are into that nerdy thing. It's the best way to do it.
yeah. I think the last time that really happened was like maybe 2010, 2012. But speaking of, I guess, the kind of theatrical experience, for those who don't know, at least in the US, I don't know where if they're doing it in Canada. They're re-releasing this as part of the Spider Mondays pro. So I guess I wanted to ask, how do you feel about that whole promo? Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man from Sam Raimi is 20 something years old. 20, if this is 20 years old, Spider-Man 1 is 22 years old then.
I mean, I think it's a good promo. They are doing it in Canada, at least in some markets, as far as I know. A friend of mine in Montreal went to see Spider-Man 2 this week in a cinema. I am not going to have a chance to go and see it in the cinemas, which I'm
Me
like
neither.
I missed it. It was this week, so I'm pretty bummed about that. But I mean, anything to show more good movies, right? I know the amazing films are debatable, but I think that the first Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 2 are both incredible. And I think Spider-Man 3 is not as it's not good, but I don't think it's as bad as most people remember, especially given some of the films that like, have come out in the meantime.
I will say
Yeah.
this. And they released when Sony released those 4K Blu-rays a few years ago. I can't remember. I think it was like 2016, 2017, right before
Hmm.
Homecoming came out, or just around there, I think. Um, they released an editor's cut of Spider-Man 3. Much better.
Oh, I believe it.
Much
I
better.
think the Spider-Man 3, I know we're talking about Spider-Man 2, but Spider-Man
Yeah.
3, I mean, it's not the best movie in the world, but when you have a director with such a distinct visual style and and a story that he's trying to convey something with, it works a lot better than like I would rather rewatch Spider-Man 3 than like either Venom movie or most of the DC movies or
Well,
you
I'll
know
disagree there. Venom is like dumb, good fun. Like if you're along the lines of like Fast and Furious
yeah, I mean maybe the
for
second
me.
one. I don't like the first one, but I do like the second one more, so maybe that one.
Yeah.
But it's not bad is all I'm trying to say. Its biggest fault, Spider-Man 3's biggest fault is that it followed Spider-Man 2, which is I think an unequivocal like masterpiece of the form.
Yeah, it'd be like, well, yeah, but yeah, I mean, I don't think there was any scenario where Spider-Man 3 was going to be a good movie. I'm sorry to the people who thought it was going to be good because of the behind the scenes stuff that has leaked out in the years since, but there's no chance. Like, and I'm
I
so
mean, we all thought it was going to be good in the moment. Like heading into 2007, like we were all like, yeah, more Spider-Man. We had no idea all the strife and like the Sony forcing Venom into the story and forcing Raimi to make changes. We didn't really have any idea the same way we would today, especially like now almost every movie that I go see there's been months of behind the scenes drops and we didn't not have that in 2007. but we didn't have it to the same extent for sure.
What we had in 2007 is, I believe the way Spider-Man 3 got announced was a wallpaper,
Yeah.
of Tobey Maguire taking off the symbiote, and, then, like a wallpaper of Venom, but like Eddie Brock. I think that's how they announced Spider-Man 3. That's how different marketing is back in the early 2000s, mid to early 2000s. It's like, "Hey, you're excited for Spider-Man 3? Here's a
And
wallpaper."
the teaser trailer I think was on Superman Returns.
Yeah, it was. But I guess we're not here to talk about Spider-Man 3. We're here to
No,
talk
sorry,
about
I
Spider-Man
derailed
2.
us pretty good.
No, I will talk about Spider-Man for as long as I'm able. I'll talk about the potential, like, Spider-Man 94 that people have been talking about, um for since X-Men 97's been out. But that's for another podcast. Maybe I'll start a Spider-Man only podcast, just like
Hmm.
Flip or something like that. Um but maybe one day. But let's get back to Spider-Man 2. I think this is probably the easiest question we'll ever answer today, and the most fluffiest question
Hmm.
of, um, how do you think it influenced the Spider-Man 2, that is. How do you think Spider-Man 2 influenced modern superhero movies, like the I don't want to say the MCU, but just modern superhero movies in general?
I mean, it's interesting because I think that it's Spider-Man 1 and 2, along with like X-Men 1 and 2, and probably and Blade are
Mm,
the sort of the ones that proved that the genre could work and make money and be a success, and be not just a success among nerds, but a success among like just the general populace. So in that way, being one of the sort of the big first ones through the not the first one through the wall, but like one of the biggest ones through the wall at the time, really sort of kick started the genre into high gear. It's probably its single biggest influence. Um, but then just I think Spider-Man 2 is a really great example of really good casting, which is something that I think the MCU really latched onto. Like, get the right people to play your characters, and that'll make people care. And in terms of like of the best superhero movies, it's got a real solid emotional core. It's not
yeah.
just it's about following the character through a journey and having that journey resonate, which I think it does in the film. I watched it just last night, and there's a part of this movie that makes me weepy, and uh, that's a hard thing to do for most movies. So,
Yeah. And I've long ascertained that, I think a good superhero movie isn't about the superhero in my eyes. It's about, like, for Deadpool, for example, Deadpool and Wolverine trailer came out this week. And I remember walking out of Deadpool, the 2016 movie, and saying, "Oh, I can show that to anybody who isn't a comic book fan and they'll love it." Because it's the humor, long list of things, right? With Spider-Man 2, I rewatched about half of it before the podcast. I was trying to upload a video, and it was messing with my like bit rate of my iTunes stream, so I had to close it out. But the thing, rewatching it, I noticed is Sam Raimi makes New York feel like an actual city. That there's that early scene where Peter's trying to make his way to MJ's play, right? And he's just constantly bombarded of, I need to be Spider-Man right now, and I really don't want to be, but also people are recognizing me and, cheering me on. And there's, that sense of place, I think. And I'm not going to I'll stop myself before I get too philosophical about how New York plays a very specific role in who Spider-Man is as a character, and how that translates very well in the Sam Raimi movies. Yeah, if I showed Spider-Man 2 to anybody, even without saying Spider-Man 1, they'd be like, "Oh, this is like this battle for this young person's soul." Even more so, I think, in the way Spider-Man 3 is, because um, it's it's this story where Spider-Man and Peter are at odds with each other. Um,
mhm.
to the point where I think they even have a flashback at somewhere in the middle of the movie when he's starting to have problems, and Uncle Ben tells him like it's okay to let go, but know that you're giving something up or something of that nature. That's kind of the overall vibe of the
Yeah,
scene.
so there's a flashback to him talking to Uncle Ben in the car, and Ben is basically like, "You have this power, you have the responsibility to use it," and Peter chooses not to in that moment. He even says, "I'm Spider-Man, no more." And it's a very powerful scene because he's basically like in that moment, sort of repudiating the Uncle Ben message. And you're right, the whole movie is about um, it's about Peter Parker choosing who he wants to be and recognizing who he has to be. And it is quite powerful in that regard because you all know what choice he's going to make, right? But the
Yeah.
middle section where he's made the wrong choice or made a different choice is an interesting one to watch.
Yeah, and it's like you as an audience member are engaged because maybe you've seen the other Spider-Man. In fact, if you've seen Spider-Man 2 without seeing Spider-Man 1, you could watch it, but some things you're not going to key in on, like the Harry stuff and stuff like that. But you're
It's interesting. I
so
actually sort of disagree. I think this film does a really good job of establishing the baselines
okay.
that you could watch it without Spider-Man 1. And also in the same way that like I'm sure you've seen Batman the animated series
I,
from the 90s.
I'm going to shock everyone and say no, I haven't.
Well, you were a kid in the 90s and I was a teenager, so that makes sense. But anyway, one of the big choices that the showrunners for that show made was they were never going to show Batman's origin. Their reasoning for that is just that everybody knows where Batman came from,
Yeah,
right? And I feel like Spider-Man is in that same category. So this movie does not show you how Spider-Man came to be, even if you haven't seen Spider-Man 1, which does show that. Like everybody knows where Spider-Man came from, how he got his power. Like everybody knows the basics of Spider-Man. So I feel like it's probably fine without them. Everybody knows that and the film does a good enough job of being like, oh, Harry's his best friend, and they have some problems because Harry hates Spider-Man. Like
yeah.
it does a good enough job with the baseline stuff that I think you could just watch this movie without seeing the first one and that'd be fine.
And I guess I'm forgetting the whole like opening credits basically recapping Spider-Man 1 to you.
I mean, well, there's that too. The opening credits are very much like a visual recap, a really well done one too.
Yeah.
Actually, I really like the art style they used for that.
I think it was Alex Ross, by the way, his stuff. But yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, it stands alone just as its own superhero movie, and also as this is something I can get emotionally invested into because I relate to Spider-Man. I've had to deal with these things of my life pulling me one way and I want to go this way. So yeah, and as for its effect on modern on future superhero movies, I think the lesson learned from Spider-Man 2 is, hey, you've got to analyze the character first so that people attach to that specific character. Because if no one attaches to Iron Man, you don't have the Avengers. If no one attaches to um, Tom Holland's Spider Man, you don't have No Way Home. Or I could probably go on and on and on. But
I mean, if nobody attaches to Iron Man or Hulk or Cap or Thor, then you don't have the first Avengers are debatably the MCU as we know it, right? Like
yeah,
not all those movies are good, but we watched them and they were all successful because the characters were so relatable and easy to latch on to.
and that's how I think it modern, but it affected even superhero movies today directly, I guess, with No Way Home. Um, but that's a topic for another time. You can read my review, Ostomy Media. Transitioning out of that, let's talk about Alfred Molina's Doctor Octopus. How did you feel about Alfred Molina? At this point, he'd never done, well, at least I don't think so, a superhero movie, and uh, yeah, he'd really done a lot of indie stuff, and um, yeah,
I mean, Alfred Molina is a great actor, and he had definitely been around for a long time. I'm trying to think what I might have seen him in before because he is in technically his film debut was Raiders of the Lost Ark, so he's been around for a long time.
fair enough.
He's right there at the very beginning. Um, he's in a movie from the 90s that I like called Maverick. He was in Species. What else? He was in a film that is super problematic by today's standards called Not Without My Daughter, which was a big hit at the time. Boogie Nights. He was in Boogie Nights, Magnolia. Like the dude was in a lot of stuff. So I think he was going into this.
This might be where my young age is showing.
Well, I'm going to say is that he's one of those guys who he'd been working solidly for like 20 years ahead of this and had really established himself as a well-respected and well-regarded character actor. And um, the guy who could show up in a movie and be in one scene and kind of steal it from the leads. I think giving him this sort of the villain role in this, he really drew on that. He really understood what it meant to step into the shoes of this character and give him a real life that it'd be very easy for this character to be very one note, but it's well enough written and well enough performed that I think he's one of the best and most iconic super villains that's ever been put to screen. Personally,
I think he does a really good job at doing the. I mean, the obvious comparison is Jekyll and Hyde, where or I don't even think that's as accurate as a lot of people think, but he just does really good at trying to draw the audience in by caring about him at the beginning. Peter goes in, I'm going to write a research paper on this guy. He's my idol, right? So it's again that story of seeing your idol fall before you and then having to like confront that.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think Alfred Molina does a great job. I think, yeah, no notes, I guess. I mean, he's going forward from 2004. Anytime I saw Dr. Octopus, even in this, I guess, spoilers for the 2018 game. Can we spoil that game?
Sure, it's a great game.
Yeah, even in that game, when Doc Ock shows up, like I'm thinking of Alfred Molina in the back of my head, like, oh, it's one of those ones where I'm like, oh, fantastic. Uh, and
That's
is
fair. I
the
think
blueprint.
I think I think his reappearance in No Way Home probably helped that. But yeah, I don't think you're wrong. It's definitely he's indelibly tied to that character in a good way.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, but let's see, what can we cover before? What can we cover in 8 minutes?
And maybe we could talk about John Jameson because he doesn't matter.
Okay, all right. 3, 2, 1. So yeah, let's talk about something that I think gets overlooked when people go back and watch this film. What did you think of the introduction of J. Jonah Jameson's son? I forget his name. That's how insignificant he is in this movie. But in the comics, he's like someone much, much bigger of a deal. He's literally the guy who brings back Venom in the comic books. So yeah, what did you
So,
think about him?
his name is John, and I think he's fine. I think that he serves his. I think it doesn't matter that he's J. Jonah Jameson's son, although that does give us a lot of opportunity to watch J.K. Simmons vamp
Hmm.
and be hilarious, be maybe the single best piece of casting that's ever happened in a movie as J. Jonah Jameson. But ultimately, that character could be anyone. Doesn't really actually matter. It matters that he's there because it's important to like Mary Jane's journey as a character and her feelings towards Peter. But it could have been literally anyone. Could have been just some like unnamed guy off the street, and it would have been just as impactful. Or just yeah, any other. It doesn't matter. He doesn't matter. Like his portrayal doesn't matter. And I wonder if that guy got maybe a little bit what's his name, Daniel Gillies, maybe got a little upset he didn't ever get to come back in a later role, but
Yeah,
like I said,
like
it doesn't matter that he's John Jameson. It just matters that he's there and he's furthering MJ's arc.
for people to understand why I asked this question, here, like I was a big Spider-Man nerd when I was a kid. So I crafted this insane theory that because he got like down and out um by being left at the altar by MJ at the end of this movie, spoilers for a 20-year-old movie, but that I think we had already known at that point maybe that Spider-Man 3 was going to deal with Venom. And I made up this insane theory that he was going to be like secretly harboring Venom and then show up as a big bad guy in Spider-Man 3. That's for whatever reason, 10-year-old me had that thought of like, oh, this guy's really important to comic books. And then Spider-Man 3 came out and it's just Eddie Brock. I was like, oh, okay.
Honestly, your theory would have been a better way to introduce the symbiote than the way Spider-Man 3 does. Like it doesn't matter to the movie.
Yeah, look, when I was 10 years old, I was making insane theories, especially about Dark Knight Rises. Although I was much older than 10 years old at that time. But I was heartbroken when Spider-Man 4 got canceled. Anyways, Um, but yeah, you're right. He doesn't matter. But 10-year-old me would be kicking myself if he didn't ask that question. Um, because it it it's like that Black Widow scene. It was real to me. It was real to me. And then I know we briefly talked about it. But we'll talk about it a little bit again, if you want to. So we mentioned it before, but this is basically a direct adaptation of the Spider-Man No More comic book story. Did you read that before seeing this movie, or was it even like a big deal to you that it was an adaptation of that story?
Honestly, so I did read it. It didn't really matter to me that they were adapted. I think it's a good story to adapt. I think it's an interesting one to adapt, but it like I'm glad that they did. But I don't actually have strong feelings about the comic book version of the story. I think that the movie version is probably better.
Yeah,
It's been 20 plus years. Who knows?
yeah. Like the comics, just like, hey, he's not Spider-Man, and then like a few issues later, I'm Spider-Man. But in this, it's like, oh no, he's gonna spend a significant time of the movie just down and out. I'm not Spider-Man, to the point where they even have like a montage up to raindrops falling on my head.
Hmm.
Uh, to which Tobey
It's a
Maguire is like,
great montage.
oh, great montage. For like when I first watched it, I hated it, but now growing up, I understand it because we all kind of just want to do that. Um, but yeah, let's see. I think it was really good. I think, yeah, better than the comic books for sure. In fact, a lot of Spider-Man movies are better than the comic books, especially Far From Home. I think their Mysterio is a lot better than the ones who's just like a Hollywood actor or a something like that. Kind of a uh, no big deal, kind of like uh, Jonah Jameson and John Jameson in this story.
Mm.
But I
I
think
mean,
that
I could talk about that montage for probably a few minutes, but you only have 2 minutes left on this session, I think.
well, I'll let's see, I'll pause it there because if we've got 2 minutes, we don't really have time to talk about a new question. But yeah, well, you've got the link, right?
It's gonna be the same link. Yeah, I'll just
Yeah,
rejoin.
same link. All right, I'll meet you back here in like a minute, if
Yep,
that. All right,
sounds good.
see you. So getting back into it, did we want to talk about the visual effects at all?
I mean, sure, some of them haven't aged. Some of the CG stuff hasn't aged particularly well. Although I would argue better than a lot of other stuff, a lot of other of its contemporary. But there's the octopus, Dr. Octopus's arms in particular are so amazingly well done
Mhm.
that I don't think they've been equaled since. Not
Yeah,
even in Dr. Octopus reappears in No Way Home, and I don't think that they are as good in that as they are in this.
no. I mean, I was like paying attention to the arms in No Way Home a lot, and then having rewatched Spider-Man 2 a little bit, I'm like, yeah, the just having the physical arms, if only for, I'm gonna get nerdy here, for like reflection or light sources on the set, miles better.
Yeah, and I think having each one is puppeteered by a different person, and
Mhm.
they all have, if you watch closely, they all have like distinct personalities, and just also the way that um he uses them is very interesting and consistent. Always using the bottom two being bigger and heavier and used for bracing stuff, and the top two being for finer detail work. I think they're really, really, really well conceived, better conceived than I think any other version of them
Yeah,
that I've seen anyway.
I think the future versions of it, like, just really focus on like the tentacleness and really forget that personality, because I think I hate to keep comparing it to No Way Home, but given the difference in tech that they used on it, I think they just focused too much on like the slithering effect in that one.
I think the version in um, Into the Spider-Verse is pretty good with
Yeah,
Dr. Olivia Octavius, but and obviously it's animation, so it's a different thing. But like, I will always prefer big, chunky metal things
yeah,
to not that. One of my biggest complaints about Avengers Infinity War and Endgame is that I hate the nanotech Iron Man suit.
Yeah.
I think it's boring. I want big chunky pieces of metal. This movie delivers that in spades.
I mean, like,
And then,
go ahead.
sorry, no, go on.
Like when Peter gets hit with the tentacles, you can feel the weight of it.
And then what I was going to say is that I think that so there's a scene after the accident that like permanently bonds um the arms to Otto's spine. He's unconscious and he's taken to the hospital, and there's a scene where the arms defend themselves.
Yeah.
And because they're a physical thing, that is one of the best scenes in any comic. I will fight anyone who disagrees. That is one of the best scenes in any comic book movie. And a lot of it is to do with the fact that Sam Raimi knows how to move a camera and
Hmm.
he knows how to interact with these props. And because they're real, like there's a scene where one guy's like pinned against the wall trying to reach a bone saw or something
Yeah.
by this tentacle, and you can feel the weight of it at all times. It never feels like anyone's faking it, even though they obviously are. The whole thing feels real in a way that CG has just never quite been able to match, like I think that the practical this movie's a great example of like blending, like choosing when to use practical and digital effects, and how getting that balance right can be so integral. Because if they'd especially in 2004, if they'd gone with more digital effects, it would have not been good. And
Yeah.
the digital effects that they do have aren't great they were amazing by 2004 standards, but they're
Yeah.
not great by today's. But they do hold up better than a lot of other stuff I've seen from that period.
Yeah. They're a little floaty, but not bad. It's not like Black Panther bad.
I mean, it's mostly that like you can always it's kind of like the Matrix sequels. Like you can always tell it's like an uncanny valley thing. It's not that it's bad, it's that you can tell it's not real anymore,
Yeah. It looks
right? And
like a video game at points.
yeah. Yeah, and there's one in particular. There's a scene later in the movie where Dr. Octopus attacks Peter and Mary Jane in a cafe, and then he leaves with her, holding onto her with one of his arms,
Yeah.
and there's a full body shot, and he just doesn't quite move right. The tentacles move right, but he doesn't quite move right. And I think we
Yeah.
hadn't really gotten there at that point, which is weird though, because she looks great, but he looks not great.
What's crazy is I just pictured that shot in my mind, and I know exactly what shot you're talking about. He just kind of
Yeah.
lankers off where the body is kind of feels divorced of the arm.
Yeah, and he feels very wooden where the arms feel not. And also he moves his neck in a way where I'm like, that's not a real person. That
Yeah.
is not a way a neck moves. But like there's the film is still good though, and that's a very good example of again, like getting that balance of like when do you deploy the best tool for the job? And obviously they couldn't film that in live action. It's too complicated a shot. But they do full body, like full live action shots with the live action tentacles where it's appropriate. And I think getting that right. I mean, Jurassic Park famously only has like 15 minutes of digital dinosaurs, but it changed the game forever, right? And I think this movie is a great example of recognizing again when to use the right tool for the job. And thankfully, Sam Raimi, with his long-standing horror background, like really knows how to move a prop,
Yeah. I
and
mean,
it's amazing.
yeah, I mean, especially in the scene you mentioned earlier in the hospital. I mean, watching this and Alien back to back are kind of jarring because you can kind of see some parallels actually in that hospital scene where um you see that little weight scale move on one of the arms, and the doctor reacts to it, but he doesn't know what's going on. And this whole I talked about it on the Alien podcast, subtle plug, but it's that whole thing about like creature behind the corner that Sam Raimi and I think other horror directors do very well.
Yeah.
But let's see. Do we want to talk about Danny Elfman's score? He returns for this. This is the last one of the three Sam Raimi movies. What did you think of his score?
I mean, I think Sam Raimi is always a win.
Yeah,
This is one of his more iconic scores. Did he not do Spider-Man 3? I
he
thought he
did
did
not.
Spider-Man 3.
I was reading up on it, and apparently behind the scenes of Spider-Man 2, they Sam Raimi and Danny Elfman had some really big blow up agreements during the recordings, and he said, "All right, I'm out for the next one." To the point where I think even like John Debney and a few other composers contributed to some of the stuff on Spider-Man 2?
Interesting. I had not remembered any of that. But I mean, Danny Elfman is iconic. You can definitely hear that it's Danny Elfman. He has
Yeah.
some trademarks that you can hear when you listen to, especially like this or Batman. I think have a lot of DNA in common. Or even like Hellboy 2, I think is another good
Oh
one that
yeah.
he did. But this one is pretty iconic. This one is like, as far as I'm concerned, in the same way that like John Williams' Superman theme is the Superman theme, and that Danny Elfman's Batman theme is the Batman theme, this is the Spider-Man theme. Like it's what when I think about Spider-Man, it's what I think about.
Yeah, and I mean it's one that they even I keep going back to the game from 2018 that they kind of recreated with the Spider-Man 2018 game. Is that theme's very, very similar to the Danny Elfman score, to the
Yeah,
point where
for
I'm
sure
like,
it is.
are you just playing the Danny Elfman score? But let's see, we already covered how it compares to other Spider-Man films, like in depth, so we can skip over that. And then really quick, I know I keep saying I shouldn't mention the game, but have you played Spider-Man 2 on the PS5?
I purchased a PlayStation 5 specifically so that I could play Spider-Man 2.
You know,
And
me too.
to be fair, I also needed a new 4K Blu-ray player. But I bought a PS5 pretty much specifically to play Spider-Man 2. It
Yeah.
was in the same way that when I bought a PS4 when I did, it was because I knew that the Spider-Man game was coming.
I mean, honestly, same. I like with that Spider-Man PS4 Pro had that, and then when I saw the release date for Spider-Man 2, I was like, all right, bet. And then I got that for my birthday, and I've played it for I think Exophase, which is like a site you can use to track your stats. I think
Mhm.
it says 2 days of playtime on
Is that all?
Spider-Man
Is
2.
that all it is? I don't know. When I first got it, I bought the version that came with Spider-Man 2, and I played the whole game in. And bearing in mind that I have a job and a wife and other things happening in my life, I played the whole game in less than a week. So I didn't
Yeah.
sleep very much that week.
Although I will say that was more time than I put into Spider-Man 1 DLCs combined. So
Oh, interesting. So I 100% completed Spider-Man's 1 and 2. I did everything.
I did
Everything you can
not
do in both
do
games.
100% on Spider-Man 1. But Miles Morales came with Spider-Man Remastered, so I might go check that out.
The Miles Morales game is good. I mean,
It,
it's short. It's definitely was clearly intended to be a DLC to the first game originally. But it's still good. And Miles Morales is a great, especially in the second game, he's a great character.
yeah, I played Miles Morales. I was more talking about Spider-Man Remastered.
Oh,
But
okay.
Miles Morales is okay, but like I could definitely tell this is like a we need more time on Spider-Man 2, so here and we need to introduce Miles Morales. So here you go. But getting back to the Spider-Man 2 we're talking about, I guess this is the point of no return for spoilers. So if you weren't turned off by spoilers before, we're going to talk even more spoiler stuff. So yeah, get out if you haven't watched Spider-Man 2. So going back to Dr. Octopus, did the redemption arc I guess feel earned, especially when you look at it in retrospect with No Way Home.
Yes, it does. I mean, I think it's a very comic booky thing that the only thing keeping him from being in control is this tiny little fully exposed inhibitor chip at the base of his neck. Being able to, at the beginning of No Way Home, it's sort of the arms sort of take back over. And it's been a minute since I've seen No Way Home, but as I recall, they pluck him out of the timeline like sort of right as or right before he's having that redemption moment where
Yeah,
he's able to take control back. And I think the film does a good enough job in the first act of making clear that Dr. Octopus, that Otto Octavius, is a good, noble character. His fall is actually pretty tragic as um, the arms start influencing his thinking. So I think that because of all that, in the third act, his redemption scene is pretty great, pretty affecting, actually. I think summoning the willpower to sacrifice himself to save the day um, is a good way to end that character for the movie.
yeah, no notes about that. I like in the theater, it was an emotionally heavy thing because it's like, oh, he's just truly trying to repent for everything he did by going down with the ship. This is the only way he knows Spider-Man is right. And to clear some things up about No Way Home, yes, he is plucked right before that moment where he's like, oh hey, The arms don't control me, I control it. Same thing with Goblin, right before he gets impaled with his glider. Sandman's a little weird, but that's a whole other podcast. Maybe in 20 years we talk about No Helm in a spoiler podcast. But um on the equal side of it, going back to um Peter giving up the mantle of Spider-Man. No, I'm actually gonna skip that because we kind of already answered that, didn't we?
Sort of. I mean, the whole movie is about Peter choosing who he needs to be, and the end, he makes a choice.
Yeah, we kind of covered that in like two other questions. So,
Yeah.
which other ones should we cover? The ending, the plot thread. I can get rid of this one because we already talked about Doc Ock's tentacles.
We
So
also
I'll just
basically
talk
talked about
about the ending threads.
plot points that haven't aged well.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah, let's talk about that next. So, on a different note, obviously, in 20 years, things aren't going to age well. So, was there anything upon rewatching this that maybe really um, felt like it didn't age well in the 20 years since?
Honestly, not especially. I mean, you could make an argument that maybe Mary Jane is too much of a damsel in distress. You could have more agency through the story, but I don't think there's any particular scenes like that are sort of egregious. The things that don't hold up for me are things like we've already talked about, those bits of CG. And then there is an actor in this movie it was fairly recently revealed to be quite problematic. And so if you're sensitive to that kind of thing, it can be distracting, a little jarring that he's in it. But like the movie's 20 years old and he's already been well paid for it, so I don't think watching it again now is gonna have a material effect.
Yeah.
Um, but like, and he's not one for me. Like, there's an actor out there that used to be one of my favorites, who I just can't, and a director out there who used to be one of my favorites, so I just can't really revisit their stuff anymore. Yeah, but this one in this movie is not one of them. But there's definitely one of those in this movie, so just be aware of that.
Yeah.
Doing everything I can to not say names right now. It's kind of
Yeah.
difficult to talk around it.
Yeah. I would agree with the Mary Jane thing. And I think I think they got better about that with, each version of Mary Jane, where I guess in Amazing Spider-Man 2 or Amazing Spider-Man 1. So I was remembering behind the scenes stuff I remembered from Amazing Spider-Man 2, where Mary Jane was supposed to be in it. But to the point where Amazing Spider-Man was like, okay, we're not even gonna touch that. And then the MCU came around and was like, okay, well, she's this entirely new character. She's Michelle Jones, but likes to go by MJ. But yeah, I think a little bit more agency to the point where she isn't just, the trope of the manic pixie dream girl. I think that the Sam Raimi trilogy really treats her as. She has her own aspirations and goals, but really her whole world, at least as far as the film is actually concerned, is, hey, what's happening with Peter? How can I be with Peter? How can I do things for Peter? How can I
She is quite Peter focused. For someone like, and I mean, I can sort of write this away a little bit in that, like, you write a character who's like in love, and especially when you're quite young, as they are meant to be in this movie, like you choose the love over material concern. But now, like, watching it as a 40-plus-year-old, you watch that movie and like she's a successful Broadway actress and he's a partially employed photographer sometime, and like, why is she wasting her time? Who can never be there for her? Like, he's never there, and it's kind of like, why is she wasting her time on this bum? Which, to be fair, is very much the point of Spider-Man. Like, the part of the point of Spider-Man is that Peter doesn't get to be happy, right? Like, he gets to be the hero. He gets to be the hero as Spider-Man, but he doesn't get to be happy as Peter. But it is a little weird that like she's so much like, I do want to be with him, this guy with no money and no prospects, with that, before she knows that he's Spider-Man. So I don't know. I'm sure they could write that a little more believably today, but it's also a perfectly fine comic book trope, and I think things like that are fine as long as you acknowledge and understand them.
Yeah, and I think that was the thing where Sam Raimi was like, "Oh, here's how she is in the comics, so I'm just gonna write her that way, or my writers are gonna write her that way, and that's how I want her portrayed."
I feel like we don't talk about enough about this movie in that Alvin Sargent is the screenwriter, two-time Academy Award winner. Alvin Sargent is the screenwriter. There's a lot of really great dialogue in this film, and a lot of it is delivered really.
I have nothing.
I mean,
except Spider-Man.
That is, I like that line. But I was actually thinking like Aunt May has a speech in the mid part of at the end of the second act that I think is really impactful. And there's a a theme that she states that gets repeated at the finale that I think is really impactful in the same way that Uncle Ben's "with great power comes great responsibility" is very
Mm.
impactful. And yeah, I think this film is actually really super well written.
Yeah, and I have no notes about that. I just it's quintessentially the perfect superhero film. Yeah, especially Ant-Man. This version is probably the best version outside of maybe the games. But
Rosemary Harris is the best Aunt May for sure.
yeah,
I think anyway.
yeah, yeah. I guess lost my train of thought. Um,
Yeah.
but I guess that brings us to the ending of the film where Mary Jane just kind of says, "All right, the super successful astronaut guy, forget him. I want to be with Spider-Man." How did you feel about that ending? Yeah, how was that ending for you? Did you like it? Was it kind of out of character? Anything like that?
No, it's not out of character. I mean, it's it's very like, young love, choose love over all else. It's very romantic in that way. And it's also, I think, very important in that, like, this whole movie, it's the main moment where Mary Jane like takes agency, where Peter has been like, we can't be together, I'm protecting you. And
Mhm.
she's like, you don't get to choose this for me. Like, it's not your choice. Like, I get to choose. I think that scene is really like well written. I think Kirsten Dunst does a really good job in that scene. I think she does a really good job in like the few like actually meaty scenes that she has. I think she actually does a really good job when she's not just relegated to screaming. And I think in particular when he hears a siren and she says, "Go get him, Tiger," and he swings away. Like, the film ends on a down note. The music takes a real like somber note on the last shot of her looking out the window. Um, which is a pretty heavy implication for stuff that might happen in the next movie, right?
Yeah,
Or just to understand that, like, she gets to choose to be with him, but he's also not wrong. Like, as long as he's Spider-Man, she will be in danger,
yeah.
and but her to choose that. So I uh I like the ending. I think it wraps up everything really well. I think it lets Peter make the choice of who he is and who he needs to be, and then it lets Mary Jane make the choice of whether or not she wants to put herself in that position.
I agree. Yeah, and you're right. Peter is right. Spider-Man 1, Green Goblin comes for her. Spider-Man 2, Doc Ock comes for her.
Mhm.
Spider-Man 3, all the villains come for her. Like, all of them, all three of them somehow know about Mary Jane. I forget how. Um,
I mean, honestly, it doesn't really like let her choose to like. He should just choose to be with her anyway because they come for her no matter what.
yeah.
Yeah.
But with that said, s- um, plot threads that maybe weren't explored that you might have wanted to see explored more in like Spider-Man 3 or something like that.
I mean, without getting into a full-blown discussion of Spider-Man 3,
Yeah.
no. I think that the film does a really good job of wrapping up its own story and leaving enough loose threads for the next film to latch on. I think a lesser version of this film would have had Harry become the Goblin in the middle,
Yeah.
much like Spider-Man 3 like sort of has a villain problem. There's too many villains and you're not able to like focus or develop any of them really well, which is, now we know now is very much um a studio interference thing and Avi Arad like forcing
Yeah.
things onto Sam Raimi's creative vision. But no, I think this job does a really good job. This movie does a really good job of staying focused, resolving its plot threads, for resolving its themes, but then leaving things open for more to happen later. So no, I don't. I have opinions about how it's handled in the next movie, but I think this movie does a great job of like finishing what it's trying to say, which
Yeah.
is interestingly not something you can say about all current superhero movies.
Yeah. The infamous one would be the end credits tag of Doctor Strange just not mattering at all.
Yet. I mean, the answer there is yet. But so lots of Marvel movies end with lots of superhero movies end with more questions than answers. And I think that this movie does a really good job of having more answers than questions at the end.
There's like hints throughout the movie of, hey, here's where we're going, get ready. Here's where we're going, get ready. This is what the
Yeah.
third one's going to be about. Get ready. So yeah, I agree. They really set everything up well to when you get to Spider-Man 3 that you're like, "Oh, awesome. They're continuing these threads from Spider-Man 2. Got it. Cool."
Yeah. I mean, if there's one thing that isn't resolved, I actually think it's fine. I think it's a very human thing to do. And toward the end, Dr. Octopus brings Spider-Man to Harry Osborn, who's dead set on killing Spider-Man, and he pulls off Spider-Man's mask and realizes that is his best friend. And Peter's like, they have MJ. Like, I have to go. Like, where did he go? And Harry's like, you killed my father. And there's a moment there where Peter could have just said, I didn't kill him, but we can't deal with this right now. He just says we can't deal with this right now. And I can see why people get upset at that, but I actually think it's a fairly human thing to be like, there's bigger things going on. The love of
Yeah.
my life is in danger. I have to go deal with this. I mean, there's an argument there for him to be like, I didn't kill him. Like it's, and I think the reason that he doesn't is if he said I didn't kill him, then the answer would be like, well, then what happened? And then they have to have like a 2 hour conversation explaining that Norman was the Green Goblin, which at the he doesn't know. And I think again, Peter just knows he doesn't have time for it. So he's like, there's bigger things going on. Like, but he could have said, like, I'll come back and we'll talk. There's
Yeah.
something there that maybe, but then, there wouldn't be character motivation for Harry. So
Yeah, there
it's
would be no Spider-Man 3.
classic. Yeah, it's one of those classic, like, why didn't they tell the cops? Well, because then there'd be no movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the most common criticism of it, especially Spider-Man 3 is, hey, Harry's coming. Harry's doing this. Why is Harry doing this? And it could easily be explained by, well, because he didn't do this in Spider-Man 2, or when asked multiple times uh, about how Harry's dad died, he doesn't do anything to say, hey, let's have a talk about this. But I agree. Once you grow up and really start to look at how little things can get complicated in your life, um, and I mean the most littlest thing, start to kind of understand that more. I mean, the one thought on Peter's mind is, I just have to go get MJ, otherwise she dies, and we both care about her. So let's put all this beef aside for this one moment.
Yeah.
So
I think, yeah, that's pretty much exactly it.
but I think that is a good place to end it. So, thank you, Matthew, for joining me talking about Spider-Man 2.
No,
And
thanks for having, I mean, we've tried to do something like this a couple of times now, so I'm glad that it actually happened. So thank you
me,
for letting me come on the show after bailing on you so many times before.
yeah, same. And for those who didn't know, we were originally going to talk about For All Mankind season 4,
Yep.
and then I think something else.
This is
We
at least
finally
our
got,
third try. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, at least. But for listeners, thank you for listening or watching or however you're interacting with this podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. If wherever you listen to or watch podcasts, leave a rating if you can, and review it on your favorite podcast app. And if you want to hear the next episode before everyone else, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You get 48-hour early access, and it's just as I think as cheap as $1, but it will be going up to $3. I believe on this time next week. So you can follow me on social media at Austin B Media on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, Mastodon, and Thread. And if you fancy Letterboxd, I'm on there as Austin B Movie. If you have any memories with Spider-Man 2 and want to share it with me, you can do so on the social media channels I discussed above, or on the Patreon community chat. But with that said, Matthew, where can people follow you?
So my social media is kind of all over the place. The easiest way to follow me is to go to my personal portfolio website, which is stretched.ca. You can find all my links to, because I write, not only do I have the podcast, but I write freelance for a number of places. So you can find
Yeah.
all links to all my work. You can find links to all my socials. If you want to just go direct, though, I am on Twitter and Threads primarily, and I'm at SmatthewAF on both of them, if memory serves. I'm trying to be on Blue Sky, but I always forget that it exists.
Me too. I just post and then get out of there. I just post my
yeah.
articles and get out of there.
So I'm at SmatthewAF on both of those and Instagram, and if you fancy Letterboxd, I'm on there at Posterboy81, which is my old handle that I have not been able to change.
I'll make sure to include those social media links in the show notes so that people can follow you, and the podcast and the Patreon, all that stuff. But with that said, thanks again for joining me, and till next time we talk.
Yeah, which honestly will probably be in like 20 minutes on WhatsApp.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, until
Good.
next
Thanks
time,
for having
everyone.
me. It has been a pleasure.